This battleship was unsinkable. That is what they said. That is what they believed. Engineers signed papers guaranteeing it. Admirals staked their careers on it. An entire nation celebrated it, and on a cold May morning in 1941, the most powerful warship ever built slipped beneath the freezing Atlantic Ocean in just 2 hours. But here's the question nobody asks. Was it really the enemy that sank her, or is it something far more dangerous that had been hiding inside her? From the very beginning, welcome to Deep Sea War Files, the only place where the ocean gives up its secrets and history finally tells the truth. Now, before we go any further, if you are new here, look at that subscribe button. Go ahead, find it. We will wait. You know, subscribing to this channel is just like taking your daily medicine after 50. You might forget it today. You might skip it tomorrow. But trust us, one day you will need it. And you will wish you had started sooner. So do yourself a favor. Press it now while you still remember. And one more thing. Drop a comment below and tell us, where in this world are you watching from tonight? Whether you are sitting in London, Lahore, Lagos, or somewhere in between, we want to know. This community stretches across every ocean, and we are proud of every single one of you. Now, let us go back. Back to 1941. Back to the North Atlantic. Back to the story of a ship that was never supposed to die. The year was 1939. Germany was rebuilding itself, not just its army, not just its economy, but its identity. And at the heart of that identity, they decided to build something the world had never seen before. They called it the Bismarck, named after Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, the man who had once unified Germany through sheer force of will. This battleship was designed to carry that same message across every ocean on Earth. We are back. We are powerful, and we cannot be stopped. Construction began at the Blohm & Voss shipyard in Hamburg. Thousands of workers arrived every single morning. Steel arrived by the trainload. Engineers worked through nights and weekends. The German government did not just want a warship. They wanted a symbol. And symbol it became. The Bismarck stretched over 250 meters in length. She weighed more than 50,000 tons when fully loaded. Her armor plating was thick enough to absorb direct artillery hits. She carried 8 massive guns, each one capable of hitting a target 17 miles away. And her engines could push her through the water at speeds that smaller, lighter ships could barely match. On paper, she was perfect. German engineers ran every calculation. They tested every measurement. They reviewed every design. And when they were finished, they looked at their work and made a declaration that history would never let them forget. This ship cannot be sunk, and the German people believed them. When the Bismarck was finally launched in February 1939, massive crowds gathered at the harbor. Adolf Hitler himself stood on the platform. Eva Otto von Bismarck's granddaughter broke the ceremonial bottle across the hull. Bands played. Flags waved. Cameras captured every moment. Germany was not just launching a battleship that day. They were launching a message to Britain, to France, to the entire world that Germany had returned as a naval superpower. But here is what none of those cheering crowds understood. History has a very dark sense of humor. Because the moment a man or a nation declares something impossible to destroy, the universe begins quietly making its plans. The Bismarck had barely left the harbor before those plans had already begun. It was May 18, 1941. The Bismarck left the port of Gdynia in occupied Poland, quietly, almost secretly, accompanied by a single heavy cruiser, the Prinz Eugene. Together, they slipped northward through cold Scandinavian waters. Their mission, given directly by the German Naval High Command, was simple but devastating: break into the Atlantic Ocean and destroy every British supply ship in sight. Britain was surviving on those supply ships. Food, weapons, fuel, medicine, everything that kept Britain breathing in the middle of a world war came across that Atlantic water. And Germany knew it. If the Bismarck reached open ocean, if she began hunting those convoys freely, Britain could be slowly starved into surrender without a single soldier setting foot on English soil. The stakes could not have been higher. British intelligence picked up the movement almost immediately. Reconnaissance aircraft were scrambled. Reports came flooding into the Admiralty in London, and the Royal Navy made a decision: intercept the Bismarck before she reaches open water. Two of Britain's most powerful warships were sent to block her path. HMS Prince of Wales, brand new, powerful, barely finished, and HMS Hood, the pride of the entire British Navy. The Hood was not just a warship, she was a legend. For over 20 years, she had sailed every ocean on Earth as a symbol of British naval supremacy. Schoolchildren knew her name. Sailors dreamed of serving on her. She was the largest warship in the world, or had been, until the Bismarck arrived. On the morning of May 24, 1941, the two sides found each other in the Denmark Strait. Guns were raised, distances were calculated, and the battle began. What happened next shocked the entire world. Within 8 minutes of opening fire, 8 minutes, a German shell found a weakness in the Hood's armor, penetrated deep into her hull, and reached her ammunition magazine. The explosion that followed was unlike anything sailors on either side had ever witnessed. The HMS Hood, 48,000 tons of British pride and power, broke apart and sank in less than 3 minutes. Of her crew of 1,418 men, only 3 survived. Britain was not just shocked, Britain was humiliated. And in London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill received the news in silence. Then he gave an order for words that would echo across every ocean and every naval headquarters in the world: sink the Bismarck. Now, the largest manhunt in the entire history of naval warfare had just begun. Dozens of warships changed course. Aircraft carriers repositioned themselves across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Radio operators worked around the clock, and somewhere in the cold gray Atlantic, a Bismarck sailed on, completely unaware that the entire British Navy was now hunting her from every direction. But the Bismarck's commanders were not afraid. They had a perfect ship. They had a perfect plan. What they did not have was much time left. There is a very old saying: God does not destroy a man with thunder. He destroys him with something so small, the man never even sees it coming. The Bismarck was about to learn this lesson from a biplane. Think about that word for a moment. A biplane. Not a modern jet. Not a powerful bomber. It's not some advanced piece of military technology. A fairy swordfish, a slow fabric-covered, open cockpit aircraft that had first flown in 1934. A plane so old, so outdated, so painfully slow that German fighter pilots had reportedly laughed when they saw it in the sky. Their advanced radar systems and anti-aircraft guns were specifically calculated for fast-moving modern aircraft. Nobody, not one single German engineer, not one admiral, not one strategist, had written a plan for what happens when something this slow attacks the Bismarck, and that overlooked detail would cost Germany everything. By the evening of May 26, 1941, the Bismarck had been running for 2 days straight. She had successfully shaken off British pursuit once before, disappearing into the vast gray darkness of the Atlantic and briefly giving her crew a moment of dangerous confidence. Her commander, Admiral Gunther Lütjens, had even sent a long radio transmission back to German headquarters, a message so lengthy that British signals intelligence used it to pinpoint her exact location. That single transmission was the first crack. The Bismarck was found again. And this time, the British sent their swordfish biplanes from the aircraft carrier, HMS Ark Royal. The first wave of torpedoes missed completely, some nearly hitting British ships by mistake in the chaos. The second wave was launched as darkness began falling over the Atlantic. 15 slow, rattling swordfish biplanes flew low through sheets of rain and fierce anti-aircraft fire. Most torpedoes hit armored sections. They bounced off harmlessly. The Bismarck barely flinched. But one torpedo, just one, found a different target. It struck the Bismarck's stern, the rear of the ship, and damaged her rudder mechanism. Not her guns, not her engines, not her armor, just a single rudder, a steering component. Something that would barely make a headline on any other ship. On the Bismarck, it was a death sentence. Her rudder jammed at a 30-degree angle, locking her into a slow, wide, helpless circle. Her engineers rushed below deck immediately. They worked in freezing, flooding compartments with water rising around their ankles. They tried manual repairs. They tried cutting jammed metal in the dark. They tried everything. Nothing worked. The greatest battleship ever built could no longer steer herself. And so she did what wounded, lost things do. She began turning. Slowly, in circles, right into the path of the British fleet that was closing in from every direction. Admiral Ludgen sent one final message to German High Command that night. It did not ask for new orders. It did not request tactical advice. It said only this ship, unmaneuverable. We shall fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler read those words, and for the first time since the Bismarck had launched, he had no answer. The unsinkable ship was not sunk yet, but she was already lost. And somewhere beneath the cold Atlantic sky, morning was coming, and with it, something far worse than a biplane. There is a moment in every great tragedy when everyone in the room already knows how the story ends. Everyone, except the ones living it. The morning of May 27, 1941, was that moment for the Bismarck. Dawn broke cold and violent over the North Atlantic. The sea was rough. Waves crashed in dark, heavy walls of gray water. The wind cut like a blade across the open ocean. And there, turning slowly, helplessly, in those merciless waters, was the Bismarck. Still breathing, still armed, but going nowhere. The British fleet arrived like a closing fist. Hum's King George V and HMS Rodney approached from the northwest, two of the most powerful battleships in the Royal Navy. Behind them came cruisers. Behind them came destroyers. Aircraft circled overhead. The Bismarck was completely surrounded from every direction, on every side. Her crew knew what was coming. And yet, remarkably, extraordinarily, they did not surrender. At 8:47 in the morning, HMS Rodney opened fire. The Bismarck, even crippled, even trapped, even steering in circles, fired back. Her massive guns still worked. Her crew still fought. For a ship that could not move, could not run, and could not escape, she returned fire with everything she had left. Early German shells came dangerously close to British warships. For a brief, stunning moment, it seemed as though the Bismarck might still cause serious damage, even in her final hour. But mathematics and firepower are cold and patient things. British shells began finding their targets one after another. The Bismarck's gun turrets were destroyed one by one. Her communications were shattered. Fires erupted across her upper deck. Her armor, so thick and so celebrated, began failing under the relentless weight of hundreds of direct hits. Men below deck worked in total darkness, in smoke, in flooding compartments, with no orders coming through and no way to know what was happening above them. Within an hour, her guns fell silent. The Bismarck was no longer fighting. She was simply absorbing punishment. And still, she did not sink. Even after hundreds of shells. Even after multiple torpedo strikes from surrounding destroyers. Even with fires raging from bow to stern, the Bismarck refused to go under. She sat low in the water, broken and burning, but her hull held. The British commanders were stunned, and then came the question that historians still debate today. Did Britain finally sink her, or did Germany sink her herself? Surviving crew members, and there were only 114 of them rescued from a crew of over 2,200 later, testified that German officers had given the order to scuttle the ship. To open the flood valves deliberately, to choose the ocean over surrender. The wreck, discovered by oceanographer Robert Ballard in 1989, showed flooding patterns that supported this testimony. The hull, remarkably, was still largely intact, far more intact than a ship destroyed purely by external firepower should have been. The truth, it seems, is somewhere in the dark water between both answers. What is certain is this: at 10:09 in the morning on May 27, 1941, the Bismarck, pride of the German Navy, symbol of Nazi power, the ship that was guaranteed to be unsinkable, slipped beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. She sank to a depth of approximately 4,791 meters. She had been in active combat service for a total of 8 days. And in those 8 days, she had sunk one of Britain's greatest warships, terrified an entire empire, and then vanished into waters so deep and so cold that the ocean itself seemed to swallow the legend whole. But the Bismarck left something behind, not just wreckage, not just history. She left a warning, one that military strategists, engineers, and world leaders have quietly studied ever since, that the most dangerous moment for any nation, any army, any organization is the moment they begin to believe their own myth, the moment they stop asking what could go wrong and start declaring nothing can. The Bismarck was not sunk by British shells alone. She was sunk by certainty, by the arrogance of men who confused engineering with invincibility, by a nation so desperate to project power that they forgot power alone has never once stopped the ocean. She rests there still today, 14,000 feet below the surface, silent, enormous, perfectly preserved by the freezing dark, a monument not to German strength, but to the oldest, most expensive lesson in all of human history. No ship is unsinkable, no empire is unbreakable, and no man is beyond the reach of one very small torpedo, aimed at exactly the right place. This has been Deep Sea War Files. If this story moved you, if it made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and we will see you in the deep.